Good evening. This is a slide presentation for slide shares on the topic Conservation as Underdevelopment. This entire slideshow has 125 slides, so it is pretty long. Now I am going to the slideshow proper. In the very first slide, you see Salman Khan, a very popular Bollywood hero, a macho hero, shooting a gun at an innocent black buck. Now I will go to the next slide as follows. The next slide shows the poor black buck which is injured in two places, one on its white abdomen and the other on its chest. The dorsal surface is black, so it is called a black buck. Black buck are not really deers, they are antelopes. That is, their horns do not fall down. Black bucks habitat mostly open spaces instead of jungles with trees. This renders them vulnerable to predators of all kinds, including Salman Khan. I will now go to the next slide as follows. Here, Salman Khan is shown in his angry mood. He is angry because this picture shows Salman Khan as a guilty party over the remains of deers in blood and tatters. The next picture will be here, Mr. Sultan in the foreground and the beautiful black buck male in the background with his wife, which is more brown, even further back, all in the grassland where they live. How can all of us live together? This is the central theme of this talk. Now, next slide. Salman Khan was considered guilty of a crime he committed nearly 20 years ago. However, this gentleman here had been committing similar such actions about 50 years ago. This is the late King Mahendra. The late King Mahendra was an avid hunter. Not only did he hunt inside Nepal, in Chitwan and other places, both tigers, rhinos, elephants, deers, boars, but he also went abroad to do some high-flying hunting. In the picture, he is shown killing a real fancy animal called the oryx, O-R-Y-X, which is found in Saudi Arabia deserts. This animal was one of the first animals conserved by the World Wildlife Fund because its numbers were down and it is a very charming looking animal which King Mahendra and many other important people had gone to hunt. But King Mahendra was never considered a villain. Next slide. Here is just a partial list of some of the animals which he killed. Bears, gharial, rhino, sambar, wild buffalo, spotted deer, barking deer, black buck like the black buck of Salman Khan, tiger, swamp deer, hog deer, leopard, wild deer and tigress. It shows the dates all the way from 1933 to 1964 and some of the record sizes because these were symbols of masculinity. These were trophy animals you showed off. Next. King Mahendra belonged to the generation and tradition of kings, prime ministers, viceroys, dukes who all indulged in highly dramatic, highly theatrical hunting expeditions. In a diary kept by the late Kesar Samsher Jangabahadur Rana is shown some of the animals and the numbers that were killed between 1870 to 1921. 90 tigers, yes, 90 tigers. This is about 60% of the last official census of tigers in Nepal at 155. But no one raised a finger that the tiger population was on the verge of extinction. It was all sport. The Duke of Edinburgh killed 2, while the Prince of Wales killed 23 tigers. King George killed 39 tigers. They were invited by kings and prime ministers, and as many as 300 elephants were put together to hunt, to corral tigers in a V-shaped enclosure with white cloth in which the hunters stayed at the narrow end and the tigers were flushed out by the elephants and the hunters killed them. The next slide shows the source of this document. The source is the diary of Field Marshal Kesar Samsher Jangabahadur Rana, in whose house is the Kesar Mahal or the Ministry of Education, since late Kesar Samsher was considered a very bookish type of Rana minister who put together one of the largest libraries together. Based on his diary, Rishikesh Shah wrote another book called Notes on Hunting and Wildlife Conservation Nepal, published in 1970. So, this is just a historical tidbit. We will now go to the next slide shows Yours truly, Amulya Tuladhar, who had gone to the Indian Forest College to study forestry because he really wanted to study wildlife, to save wildlife. He figured to save wildlife like tigers, they needed space, habitat, forest. So this was the place to go. But the Indian Forest College had a long history of colonial hunting, and there, in official dinners, we were inside dining rooms where tiger skins were displayed. Here I am having dinner at a tender age of 21. But before I went there, I had already spent about 6 to 8 months in Chitwan National Park studying tigers. I will go into the details of that later on. Here I am. Tigers. Yes, I am shooting a tiger, but with a camera, not with a gun. But for research, not for trophy. And below me is a tiger, tranquilized, not dead. Behind me is a sal tree, Shoria robusta. On the right side is the elephant grasses. We had just completed radio coloring the tiger for research purposes. I was working for the Smithsonian Nepal Tiger Ecology Project. Once the tigers were radio colored, we followed them around with specific radio frequency transmitters and receivers as follows. Here I am describing this research called RadioTelemetry because we try to find the tigers based on distance measure or telemetry with radio frequency, and we follow the tigers on elephants, on chartered planes, on jeeps, on walking, all the time to see what is the range of their habitat, who do they kill or socialize, so that if the tiger population started to increase, we would have a scientific basis to recommend which direction, which space might be taken over for more tiger conservation. As a result of our work, Parsa Wildlife Reserve was later annexed into the Chitwan National Park to give it more space for its habitat. Next slide as follows. In the next slide here, I am atop an elephant. We had about 28 elephants at our disposal. In front of me is the mahout, the elephant driver, and he is carrying an aluminum T-bar, which is really an antenna, a directional antenna, which I try to swivel on top of my head, left to right, in about 120 degrees to look for signals once these antennae are attached to my receivers. And since each tiger or tigress has a particular frequency, if they are nearby, their signals are shown in the receiver. Once I am swiveling and I get the strongest possible signal, that particular direction is supposed to be where the tiger or tigress is. And by a process of triangulation in which we draw these lines, and wherever these lines of triangulation intersect would be the location of the tiger. That way we map out the locations of the tigers and their habitat. Now towards the back of me are the tops of elephant grasses. Elephant grasses because they are so tall that they drown elephants, and tigers move inside them unseen by predators, unseen by human beings. Next slide. Here, after we have captured a tiger by tranquilizers, we make our measurements and then take a little indulgence after a book by one of the first travel agents or tourism foundation called Boris. Based on Boris's management of Hotel Royal, where guests for King Mahendra's coronations were put up when Nepal was still an unknown Shangri-La, a book was written called Tiger for Breakfast. And here I am too having tiger for breakfast. Here I am eating up a tiger. No, the tiger is not dead. The tiger is very much alive. He does not like it. But I am joining my small canines with his large canines in a picture of eating him up while he is tranquilized. So it's a little cheating on the side, but I like this dramatic effect. At this time, I was only 20 years old. I will now stop for resuming later on. We will finally the formal title of my presentation is as follows: Conservation as Underdevelopment, where I pose the key question: has conservation in Nepal over the last 60 years been one of the main reasons holding back Nepal in terms of development? I make a key distinction by saying that there has been quote-unquote development incrementally. But my question is more pointed. Is this the maximum development we could have had? Or are we paying a lot of opportunity cost by allocating our resources, money, political capital, social capital, cultural resources, and all that for the purpose of expensive conservation efforts, where we have got a little gain here and there, but we have lost a lot of development from social costs for the poorest people around national parks to large level national costs of opportunity for big development in terms of dams, in terms of roads, in terms of electrical highways, in terms of all the costs we could have saved in the allocation of military for conservation. Supposedly about 40% of our forestry is for development. These are the questions I will explore in the upcoming slides. Here I show a map of Nepal which is whole and unmangled. Just the country and the districts, nothing else. Every country, every district, every village and cities, and every citizen within that have unfringed opportunity to develop by themselves according to our new Constitution 2015. But we will now see conservation does not allow this. Here is a map of conservation in which large areas have been shaded for large-scale landscape conservation approaches. The latest in the series of different conservation approaches. You can see nearly 2/3 of Terai has been taken over for Terai Arc Landscape. Almost a big chunk of central Nepal has been taken over for Annapurna Camp and Chitwan National Park or Chitwan Annapurna Landscape. Nearly all of the eastern Himalayas have been taken over for Sacred Himalayan Landscape. And the far west has now been taken over for Sacred Kailas Sacred Landscape. The latter two, Kailash and Sacred Himalayan Landscape, are really transboundary landscape approach where there is cooperation beyond the border of India and China to have this landscape quote-unquote conserved. When an area is taken over for conservation, the constitutional rights of the people there, the constitutional rights of the citizens, the districts, the villages are constrained for conservation purposes, and they cannot develop as much or as freely as they as per the Constitution. Their activities are constrained to be within the larger goals of conservation. That is why I call this map Mangled piece of landscape. Next slide, please. And so we are seeing more differences of landscape. Here is the eastern Himalayan landscape, both of Nepal, Tibet, Bhutan and Sikkim, all parts of the sacred Himalayan landscape. You will also notice that in all different countries and areas, it is usually the marginal Mongolid people of Tibet, of Sherpas, of Lepchas, of Nepalese, who have been sort of strong-armed into accepting this constraint. Next slide. This shows more closely how Terai Arc Landscape and Sacred Arc Landscape has been conceptualized. You will notice within Terai, which is the southern green belt, small patches of green and red, which are really old protected areas. Chitwan National Park towards the center, Bardia National Park towards the western end, and then patches of yellow, which are buffer zones. So, this highlighted area of green are really an effort to conjoin these protected areas into a larger area called landscape. And the regions given are multifarious. From the fact that they have different types of ecoregions, different types of ecotypes, different types of corridors for metapopulations of animals, all of these regions are mostly biodiversity related regions, not so much human livelihood. So we are really prioritizing ecology and environment over local livelihoods, even local people's priorities and opportunities. Here is a close-up of Terai Arc Landscape, one of the first landscape approaches implemented in Nepal, and there you see the reason being we are trying to make sure that the metapopulations of charming animals like tigers, rhinos, which used to roam about unimpeded from Chitwan to Budhathoki, are now impeded by habitations, by cities, mostly shown as yellow, so that tigers of Chitwan cannot mate with tigers of Tuladhar. Same with rhinos. This causes these animals to intermate among themselves, raising the possibility of Rhesus and more diseases coming up, and ultimately causing them to be extinct, even though their numbers are generally increasing. So, we try to identify those places where there are remnants of greenery, remnants of forest mixed with agricultural land, which can be saved, quote unquote, so that animals can go from one place to another unimpeded. These places are called corridor. As you can see in the map, there are several corridors marked in red: Lal Dhari towards the west, Basanta, and then we have Madhepuri, Lamai, etc. Next slide. This concept has been enthusiastically promoted all over the regions by international governmental agencies, including ICMOD. ICMOD stands for International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, which coordinates activities in the 8 mountain countries of the Himalayan and Hindu Kush. And here it has proposed to start the Mount Kailash landscape approach involving India, Nepal, and China, Tibet, centered around Mount Kailash, which is considered to be the king of the Himalayas, the legendary place where Lord Shiva lives, and also the source of the major Himalayan rivers Indus, Satluj, Ganges, and Brahmaputra. Next shows studies that have been proposed to implement this landscape approach with these vertical yellow lines called transects in many places, 7 places, including Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, Sikkim, Bhutan, even Bangladesh and Burma, all under the auspices of ICMOD. Next slide shows many of these changes and many of these landscapes. Now, this all began quite early in the 1990s in one of the seminal papers of Dr. Chandra Gurung, who was in the leadership levels of King Mahendra Trust, now called National Trust for Nature Conservation, and later also on the World Wildlife Fund, Nepal, in which the proposal was put forward to link these protected areas in grey color here, the buffer zones in shaded black color, all together in the larger landscape shown here in large arrows, grey color arrows. Number 1 being Terai, number 2 being Koshi Everest, number 3 being Himalayas. Next. So, this particular picture shows how the idea of conservation is developing in such a way that larger and larger areas have been set aside for conservation purposes. In the 90s, there were only protected areas where no human activities were allowed, no human habitations were allowed. So, in Chitwan, there was always the pressure to remove Badampur village within Chitwan National Park. In Rara, the village nearby have been removed to Nepal Gulf. In Langtang and Everest, there was a great deal of pressure to remove the Sherpa settlements, etc. And whilst the removal pressures were going on, there was also the pressure to remove or constrain the activities of the people around protected areas to get them to be partners in conservation by giving them certain percentage of the income of protected areas. These areas were called buffer zones, and buffer zone vastly increased the protected areas. It may not be 100% protected, but it surely is a constraint on the economic activity of the people there. Sooner, we had even larger concept where we talk not only of officials and government professionals, but also local people who were convinced or persuaded to put in more conservation activities like solar heaters, etc., or desist from cutting down trees in return for conservation-oriented positive benefits, including fees from conserved areas. One of the first places where this was implemented was the Annapurna Conservation Area project. Subsequently, the concept has been enhanced and increased into Kanchenjunga, into Gauri Shankar, etc. Now, in the 2000s and over, we are now trying to link national parks, wildlife reserves, buffer zones, conservation areas into even larger areas called landscape approach, for which we began with Terai Arc Landscape, Western Terai Landscape, East Sacred Himalayan Landscape, Kailash Mountain Landscape, and the Chitwan Annapurna Landscape. This is the exciting thing on conservation approach nowadays. This shows how the areas have been increasingly added. So in some times we had areas of 932 for Chitwan National Park, and at different places different national parks were added. So in 1991 we added 9,129 kilometers square, and in 2005-2010 5,208. The next figure shows that in terms of national park we have 10,853 square kilometer of national park and 15,426 of conservation areas. Now both of these graphs do not include the areas under landscape approach yet. So these graphs were prepared by the Department of National Park and Wildlife Conservation in 2011 by the then Director General Mr. Krishna Prasad Acharya, and he said that the total area was something like 23.23% of total land area of Nepal, or nearly 25%. Now you see here all kinds of ecological regions. One of the scientific reasons is to make sure that all ecological ecoregions are well represented in the protected areas. That is not so. We find that there are too many areas on high Himalayas, too many areas in Terai. Both areas are somewhat marginal people according to Nepal political scenario. But in the mid-hills, which is inhabited by the most powerful castes of Nepal, we have only 3, and very teeny ones. In Kathmandu, we have Shivapuri National Park, SNNP. We have Khaptar National Park, and there is a third one which I can't see on the map. So, this small chart shows how the development has been increasing from 1970 to the 2010, in which new issues are coming up. Most of these issues are externally imposed agenda, in which there is an effort to try to get some public participation as well. So we start from centrally protected ecological regions in 1970s to now climate change and payment for ecological services. The same paradigm shift has been shown in this chart from environmental protection in 1970s to climate change, and landscape approach falls under the second last one, sustainable development. Here we are seeing now, these are actual areas and projects where the government of Nepal has invested people, money, legal powers, etc. to help in conservation. The question now arises, could those same number of people, their salary, their training, their capacity build up, the political cost, the social cost, been invested in other type of adventures or investment so that Nepal got a better deal in terms of development dividend for all of Nepal instead of just a few people involved in this enclave, the conservation experts as well as the foreign NGOs. Here we have Nepal government's legal investment in terms of National Park Regulations Act 1973 as well as important policies from wildlife farming policies of 2003 to semi-government institutions like National Trust for Nature Act, for which a separate regulation have been developed. All of these represent different phases of institutional commitment made by the state of Nepal towards conservation. Can all those energies and investments and institutions be invested elsewhere for a better return? That is a question I am asking you to consider. Here we see the different activities sort of broken down under conservation, from habitat management to culture conservation, and in the chart on the right side we see the total investment in green from about 192,234 thousand rupees perhaps, yes, 1,000 rupees perhaps, in 2065-66, that is almost 10 years ago, to now 5 times its number to around 508,091,000, so around $500 million rupees. In that total investment in green, you can see that the state of Nepal government investment in terms of its salary, in terms of maintenance of infrastructure, etc., is also increasing, and increasing as a larger percentage of total investment from 156 million to 378 million, more than double. And the development aid, which is the red one, mostly funded by donor agencies, is increasing but at a slighter rate, from 35 million 5 years ago to 129 million in 2066. So we have had some successes with all this investment. Say for tiger numbers, which used to be around 98, has climbed down to 155, okay, and it's now hovering around 192 or so, okay, and we are trying to sort of take a few more tigers to different areas like Bardia, etc. So we are having quote-unquote success, but sometimes there will be some setbacks. Thus, last month we had 4 tigers dying in Chitwan National Park, and rhinos too. From 800 we had a steep decline to nearly 400, 300 and 100, and now slowly recovering all over to 534 with a lot of conservation activity. Yes, we've had some success, okay, with other animals too that require conservation: tigers, cows, crocodiles. These are all endangered animals which require a lot of investment. Okay, you see in the beginning or in the top row there's black buck, okay, which was shot by Salman Khan at the very beginning of our slide. Now, so in the next few slides, I'm going to talk about the history of conservation in Nepal from the pre-modern era, number 1, just before our Nepal sort of opened up to the modern world before 1950s, where kings and prime ministers were exclusively involved in big-time hunting, and they began to notice a slight decline in charming animals like tigers and rhinos, and they wanted to make sure that their family members and other people were aware of them. So, Hanuman Dhoka Museum and Central Zoo are established for those people high up who could not go to the jungles. The second phase started in earnest once Nepal opened up in 1950s, and one of the first things of conservation was to figure out just how many animals and plants were there. So, government started to mobilize at the institution level to try to measure and identify the number of trees, plants and animals. On one hand, by the Department of Plants under the Ministry of Forestry, and on the other hand, through Tribhuvan University Institute of Science, the establishment of Natural History Museum. So both of them have been trying to document the biodiversity of species in Nepal with some success. Then by 1973, we said that we need to actually protect both animals, plants and areas so that they are not lost with this rapid development, including settlement and encroachment of Terai forest. So a National Parks and Wildlife Conservation Act was enacted in 1973. Beginning with Chitwan National Park, we had a series of national parks, wildlife reserves and hunting reserves in which money was invested, laws were invested, people were trained, etc. And subsequently, as political changes were made, these national parks were amended to have buffer zones, Ramsar sites, etc. But by 1980, the whole world was gaining lots of experience in conservation, and they tried to put together a systematic idea of what world conservation strategy would be in 1980. And Nepal tried to learn the lessons of world conservation strategy in its own national conservation strategy in 1988, helped by IUCN of course. And as a result of the strategy and development, we have an Environmental Protection Act 1996, as well as Nepal's sort of ready to sign up the Convention on Biological Diversity in 1994, in which Nepal has been systematically improving its biodiversity conservation by submitting periodic reports of what it has done toward biodiversity conservation, what constraints it faces, what sort of technical aid it needs, etc. And in this line, the latest report was filed in 2014, the fourth report. Now, we see that after nearly 20 or 30 years of experience, we see that newer concepts are developing, and we are beginning to raise the question that perhaps instead of having only professionals with lot of central powers like National Park Department full of foresters, rangers and wildlife specialists helped by the Nepal Army, Maybe we can have better conservation with local people involved with just little bit of technical help, just like the conservation area of Annapurna camp, which is cheaper, much more sustainable, etc. Okay, these started happening in late 1980s and late 1990s, and now as a result of success, we are now producing a much more systematic, ecologically and theoretically uh, robust models based on landscape ecology and sustainable development called landscape approach, beginning with Terai Arc Landscape, Western Terai Landscape, Cyclic Himalayan Landscape, Kailash and Transbound. This is the in thing now. This is the maturing thing now, beginning in early 2000 and still continuing. However, now is the time to ask and pause. Okay, what has been the cause behind the benign smile of conservation? We find conservation full of this nice halo of doing nice things to the world, nice things to the environment, nice things to ecology, just like Mona Lisa. But when you see the conservation when it's actually practiced, it's Mona Lisa with the AK-57, with the army uniform. There's a lot of coercion involved in conservation, which often does not make it to mass media and public consumption. Okay, here are the next few slides in which Nepal Army has been a major player in conservation activity, the major success behind tiger and rhino rehabilitation, and it is said that without the help of Nepal Army patrolling these areas for poachers and other enemies of conservation, we would have lost a lot of these animals. And this was sort of proven during the time of Maoist insurrection, in which Nepal Army, which were allocated for conservation, had to be reutilized for internal peace. And then we saw a spike up in animals that were lost. So next few slides are from the Nepal Army webpage. These are sort of formal statements made by the Army, stating in this slide the type of activity it does: patrolling, protection, and controlling encouragement, supporting nature conservation research work, providing manpower for counting wildlife census, etc. And they are all over all of the national parks and wildlife reserves. 7 of them are listed here, from Kushitapu, Sagarmatha, Chitwan, Parsa, Langtang, as well as Shefuksundu, Bardia, Khaptar, Suklapata, Shivapuri, etc. So there is a lot of manpower that has been invested from the army. Here is the figures. This figure says that this Nepal Army has been involved from 1960s and 70s, and they have invested some 372 individuals as well as large number of security forces. Here it actually gives the numbers right here. 7,627 Nepal Army people are involved in 138 outposts, 7 battalions, 7 companies. That's a lot of national people, that's a lot of money, and that's a lot of investment. No wonder we do get some results like zero poaching year 2030, etc. The next slide shows Nepal Army people performing nature conservation duty, and they work very closely with Ministry of Forestry, National Park officers, as well as nature conservation. And here they also get help from international organizations like FAO, and these are all put to the service of conservation. And here they are in action. Nepal Army in the foreground with local people patrolling together for poachers. Now it has not been 100% successful, but it has been largely successful. That's the good side of it. The bad side is that poor people, weak people, people who are not in the political limelight, they tend to be exploited. They tend to be humiliated. They tend to be persecuted. And whenever poachers are found, these are usually the poorest of the poor. Pariyars, Yonjans, Chaudharis, the main kingmakers never are caught in the net. Now, there is a series of articles sort of calling into question the dark side of national park. This article, written by Shraddha Ghale only last year, she still continues to write even in this year, is really from a book produced by marginalized people, Chitrabhadra Baji of Chitwan National Park, called Samrakshit Kshetrama Dvanda, or conflict in protected areas, in which very poor people, very weak people are persecuted by army and national park officials for the sake of conservation. So here is the book. Here's one story. It talks about Krishna Bote, who belongs to the fisherman class. Very poor, they have no land and they have only an occupation. One day, one bote person was caught by army men on the charge of killing a vulture. He mentioned that he saw the vulture already dead, but he was after furnished proof that he was innocent, and then he was put in this legal circle for a long time in which they felt trapped and hopeless. This is one side, and there are many such stories. Okay, there is another story, much more recent, just a few weeks ago, from Shraddha Ghale herself, 2027, in which she enlarges the scope of violence not only into the social weak class, but also the big iron Jews which are involved for larger and much more dangerous type of land grab for conservation. So let me continue. Here it talks about political costs of alienating locals. Okay, that's one point. And then here they talk about conservation ideas dictating the national areas. For instance, forests are now considered more important as climate change sequestration rather than livelihood for local people. Okay? As a result, forests are persuaded to be diverted for RED or ecotourism for people outside, rich people, tourist people, rather than local people's livelihood for trees, for wood, for fodder, for areas all of such, all in the name of larger benefit for the nature. Okay? This sort of land grab has a very benign title called landscape level conservation. And here we have benign ING like WWF working for landscape. But we have an alternative, as we say. These two pictures show local people doing conservation. The one on the right shows conservation, Kanchenjunga Conservation Area mothers committees, which are managed by local people with just the minimum help by technical manpower supplied by the King Mandate Trust, with very little running cost, and they are working fine. And as a result of this large-scale investment in local people, community forestry, against the centralized investment by Minister of Forestry with technicians and foresters and international agencies like FAO and World Bank, where between 1978 LRMP towards the left and 1994 National Forest Inventory 1994, we lost a lot of forests from 42.7 to 39.6, and it was only later after 1993 when community forestry really took up that by 2014 FRA, Forest Resource Assessment, we had an improvement in forest growth as a whole from 39.6 to 44.7. It's only 5%, but given the fact that from 1950s to 1994, Nepal had witnessed deforestation at large scale, despite all sorts of programs, despite all sorts of scientific forest management because of the weakness of governance, because of the weakness of central planning, because of the weakness of command and control, and also because of the weakness of the numerous INGOs advising and providing technical aid. We lost a lot of forest. So here is one area where local people were considered to be villains, were now the heroes of actually increasing forest. So what is the sort of money that is allocated for forest conservation? Here are just some figures which I got from most recent newspapers. 15 billion for forest conservation, then 1.92 billion for tree conservation, and 7.65 billion for environment conservation. Together they make around 2 billion worth of forest conservation. So I have not been an enemy of conservation for long. In fact, my entire life I have been a friend of conservation, trying to invest all of my training and knowledge in investment. So here I have taken out my foresters, my students, to Langtang National Park a few years ago, in which the Langtang National Park warden happened to be one of my. He is Mr. Dhakal. At that time, he was the warden of Langtang National Park. He was my master's student of natural resource management, biodiversity conservation, as well as my Institute of Forestry student at ISc and BSc level. Currently, he is the chief warden of Chitwan National Park. Now, this is the picture of Mr. Dhakal. So, I have been investing my knowledge, my experience in training people like him, from National Park person like Mr. Dhakal, all the way to Director General Mr. Krishna Prasad Acharya, who became Director General of National Park, and later National Parks, later the Director General Department of Forest. Not only that, I train lower level officers and rangers. These are several people. As you can see, they have like 20-30 years of experience, and they have come here for getting an additional degree, a master's degree. And here I have been teaching them biodiversity conservation, and I taught about 8 or 9 batches of them at the Nepal Engineering College Natural Resource Management. And here are my students, even last year. The students in the background are my National Parks and Wildlife Management, Forest and Wildlife Management group, and they have gone to get some interview from the Director General of National Park, Director General of Forest, Mr. K.P. Acharya, who was also a Director General of National Parks and Wildlife Office, and my own thesis student at Institute of Forestry. So these are all my students, and I have invested a lot of my effort in training these. And I have not given up. Last year, a friend of mine, a photographic friend of mine, produced a book called Birds of Nepal based on photographs, and I was there to launch that photograph at the Yellow Mine only last year. So my love of national parks, my love of wildlife, my love of nature is still there. The question I ask is, what is the best way to continue? Here is the Birds of Nepal, which was launched, for which I happened to get the autograph copy from Hari Sharan Kaji, one of the first conservation bird ornithologists of Nepal. I am now going to pause a few minutes before I come back again. Here, even in my college days, I was very intimately involved and committed to conservation. This is a picture of myself working with Rhesus macaques as a part of international research done by Harvard University and Johns Hopkins University. Okay, here's a little write-up about what they were doing, studying behavior ecology and nutrition of these national parks. So, in this project, we had names for all of these monkeys like Leah, which are individually identified, and we were following them over 3 months period. What they ate, where they slept, how much they fought, and what was the reason why their populations were somewhat stable. This question was interesting to Johns Hopkins Medical Center because these monkeys were used for medical research and pharmacological research, in which many such monkeys died during the period of research and ruining their experiments. So they wanted to find out what keeps these monkeys somewhat stable in population, which we all know that these monkeys in Swayambhu, in Pashupati, in lots of these monkey areas have been somewhat stable as long as we remember. So next. Now we are now trying to figure out what sort of advantages we are getting for conservation. One such advantages are called ecotourism. There has been a number of works in recent years trying to figure out how many tourists or what sort of percentage of tourists who visit Nepal actually visit different national parks and wildlife reserves. And the figure is between 40 to 50%. In terms of the fees they pay to go into the national parks and wildlife reserve, this comes out to be approximately 1% of all tourist dollars. So, in 2018, the total amount earned by Nepal from all tourists were rupees 200 billion, and we can say the amount which was contributed by national parks was about 1% or 2 billion. Now we have a series of tables taken from government sources, this one from Department of National Parks and later from government Ministry of Finance, etc., trying to figure out the number of tourists, the number of earnings, etc. So in this particular table, we have at the bottom total, and which says that in 2071-72, that is the Nepali year, or approximately 2016, we had about 500,000 tourists visit all of the national parks. As I said, these national parks contributed only about 1% to total tourist revenues, 99% going to different parts of village, hotel industry, etc. So in terms of the money which government got in return for all that investment, it's only 1% of total revenues. So here we talk about actual money earned, and we say here the money earned is at the very bottom total. If you look at 2016, again approximately 500 million rupees. A little better looking picture again from Department of National Park, saying that Chitwan National Park is the most popular one, earning something like 200 million rupees per year. And then we have Sagarmatra Everest is 116 million, and Langtang 33. We have Shivapuri, which is located in Kathmandu Valley, earning 23 million, etc. All of this money, which looks impressive, is really quite small compared to the money which Nepal invests in national park. As I said, all of this money do not add up to be even 2 billion a year. Okay, here's another two pictures showing the number of tourists that have come up and the money that have been earned. So in 2016, for instance, we see around 350,000 tourists coming into different national parks, etc., and earning approximately 1.3 billion rupees. So, what are the expenses of conservation? So we have the salaries for people, we have the maintenance for people, we have census expenses, we have all types of expenses, we have all this area to patrol. These are the expenses for. And here we see in terms of money we are getting, okay, not much from Botanical Garden Godavari. We are collecting only around 3 million rupees in 2010 to around 6 million rupees 2000. So we talk about conservation for forestry, a little more larger concept than only national park. How much does the government invest? We see that revenue collected from entire forest sector is only around 258 million rupees in 2015. See the same picture showing 2015-16, only 258 million rupees have been collected from royalty and other expenses in forest. Okay, how much money has been invested in 2016 budget? 630 million. That is almost 3 times the amount of money that is collected from forest development. Okay, here again we see different other commitments. We talk about 1.8 billion rupees committed to the Chure forest. Okay, we talk about 380 million for community forestry. Here we talk about different types of funding. We see that the total funding in green is increasing, the total funding in blue, public fund, that is government fund, is increasing, but the total funding from donor or ODA is very small, red one. So the larger and larger component of the total fund for conservation is being borne by Nepal state government, and the question here is, could we have found a better use for that money? Is that the best possible money? Conservation is like consumption activity. It's not like capital expenses. It's mostly money spent and gone with nothing, not too much in return. So I'm going more into the facts and figures of how much money has been spent. But the general idea is that government is spending about 50 to 85% more, whereas the donors are spending only in 15% or less as part of total conservation. And we are looking into Mount Kailash, for instance. After $3 million investment, we are seeing that biodiversity is taking up 35%, and only half of that is for livelihood. Meaning, local people livelihood is only half as important as wildlife and biodiversity. Here's again the picture from National Park Nepali portion, talking about how much money we have earned. So it talks about rupees 550 million earned, about half a billion in 2000. Again, it talks about expenses 1.2. See, half a billion earned, 1.2. So basically, only we are getting less than half of what we invest. Here again, we might get a little money here and there for renting out our national parks and conservation for movie making. It looks nice and newsy, but the total money is okay. Here are future plans in terms of National Biodiversity Strategy Action Plan, okay, all the way to 2020. And it is planned that 672 million would be spent for different activities: A, B, C, D, E, F. A being forest biodiversity, E being mountain diversity, etc. The interesting part is how much of this expense will be borne by the government Nepal or Nepal government's tax money, and how much will be borne by the donors, etc. And this picture at the end shows more than half, or 55%, would be borne by government Nepal, and only about 10%, 10 to 25% would be borne by donors and INGOs. So it is a greater and greater lag and weight on government Nepal. Same type of theme, which shows that in terms of forest expenses, government is spending around 75%, around $70 million per year, and the loan is only about, okay. In future too, larger target, we call IT target for 2020. Same pattern. Government is large portion 85%, and outside portion around 30%, 15%. Okay. Fancy topics like RED, which proposes promises to give a lot of money in terms of carbon sequestration, is still money in the theory. Okay. Whereas our expenses for RED, measurement, counting, etc., are all money which has not given us any return. NTNC, which is actually a semi-government organization, mobilizes a lot of these donor agencies, and it's also money which is more of a more of a consumption activity than okay. Same activity as I mentioned before. 84% from government, 14% from etc. Okay, and here too we are talking about 15.34 billion for forest conservation in 2018, and we are talking about 1.92 for today, etc. Same activity, lots and lots of money being investment, very little in time. Okay, military, which is expense difficult to figure out. This is from Wikipedia. Talks about $57.2 million. That's a lot of money in terms of rupees, and a large part goes into nature conservation, which is not part of the military budget, but part of the okay. So in all of this entire landscape, I have brought into question all of these critical questions when I teach a course called Landscape Level Conservation to Masters of Forestry and Wildlife Conservation at Institute of Forest. Here I raise a question which I first raised in 2011 critical paper called Landscape Conservation Approach in Nepal with my colleague Dinesh Raj Bhujo. This paper I first set out a little bit history of landscape approach, and then I call into question the main theoretical and political ecological type of cost or landscape conservation approach, which are not generally considered in the landscape approach which are implemented. So I mentioned that a lot of these governments have been doing the bidding of NGOs, okay, and while protected areas often ignore or minimize the benefits or the priorities of local, and despite all of these non-ideological experimentation, we are actually seeing basically the shifting of local and national priorities and agenda to INGOs and international priorities. Okay. Nonetheless, we can see this activity is still strong and going. We have a new Homegrown Conservation under landscape management, a major money investment in which a vertical alignment, the Chitwan National Park and Annapurna National Park has been proposed with UN. Okay, but the problems remain. Problems are very, very poor, who are in the jungles, who are local people all over the world, not only in Nepal, but in South America, deserts, etc. The conflict between people and nature. And most of the conservation are geared for the people who are rich, the people who are powerful, the people of the first world countries, the rich people of the third world countries. Their agenda is basically subverting the agenda and the benefits of the poorest of the poor people and the poorest of the poor. See, this debate unabated. So my main question here, my main conclusion here is that conservation has been a net loss, earning less than 1/10 of the money that's there. Okay, I am trying to now dramatize this not only in terms of money, figures, pictures, etc., but in terms of real people. Here is a young boy of 8. Okay, imagine Nepal is like the young boy of 8, full of potential, full of innocence, full of things people there want to be, etc., but also weak, not able to do whatever he can. This young boy was coming back from his school into his village house, and he was trudging this road next to a forest in the background. This forest is Benign forest, not very far forest. It's a forest in Budhathoki area, an old religious forest. This is the area where it has been proposed to have a new jungle safari instead of the central zoo. And while walking there, this young boy was bounced back by a leopard, a mother leopard with 3 cubs, looking for food, not finding it in the forest, not finding it in near villages, and desperate to make sure the cubs had some milk, maybe some meat to eat. And what did he find? This young boy. So only around 5 o'clock or so, this young boy was going home with his own friend, same as the leopard pounced from the back before he could yell anything. They were dragged into the forest. In a matter of 2 to 3 hours, when the villagers rushed into the forest to look for the boy remains. See, the upper thighs and the hip has been eaten up, the head has been eaten up. There's only the torso and the toes, and they could not locate the leopard. They did find the leopard in the cameras, and it had 3 cubs. They are still trying to find a leopard. They are still not find. Now, would you call leopard bad? No. The leopard is equivalent to conservation here. Just like conservation has mangled Nepal, the leopard has mangled the field over here. The question is, should you have this mangled boy or mangled Nepal, a mangled creature, or with people? So, this is a little boy in Nepal, all mangled up and eaten up just by a. And here I am saying, just like the mangled up, our constitutional right to freedom to earn whatever we want, not only as an individual level, but as citizens, but as people, to have hydroelectric dams, to have factories, to have a big development, are now constrained because we have to lock up trees for carbon sequestration, we have to lock up forests for biodiversity conservation, we have to lock up a lot of these opportunities for people to improve their livelihood, both villagers as well as city people. They have to stay without water and electricity for so long, all because we are putting conservation for the benefit of international INJs, international ecological lobby, and for a small enclave of Nepalese foresters and wildlife properties who are getting a lot of money. So, these are the questions I just raised, written up in text, and this continues on. Here is a nice video put up by international media, Al Jazeera, for which the pages have been given, and it has been written by Subina Srastha, who was a Nepali correspondent for Al Jazeera, and she had visited this Rara National Park after 10 years and found out that nothing had improved there. She talked to people there, Rup Bahadur, and said he hates National Park, and National Park has really ruined their life. Okay, they try to have a little beekeeping, and the bears come up and they have mauled his son's face, no income, etc. So there's a lot of dangers there, and this is danger is there not only in Rara but in all national parks. In Bardia, the Tharus are persecuted. In Chitwan, the Padampur people are persecuted. All over, and now all of these national parks are under lot of conflict for developing needs to put up railroads inside national parks, to put up Chitwan highways coming from Rasua, to put up high tension line to transfer electricity. The question now is, are we going to keep quiet? Are we going to concentrate our development for more energy, for more water, for more development, just because when these are the questions I am asking all of you to answer, think, to develop your own questions along the way. Choose up your thing, look at the critical question like a bow and arrow, and shoot the arrow. We make a lot of mistakes, and I am only a master because I have made more mistakes than you. But you could with smile on your face, like I do, teaching many years. Here I am teaching at Golden Gate International College, and here I am continuing to teach at Institute of Forestry, where I taught many years ago at a new program which I wanted at the beginning of my life, the master's degree of wildlife management. It did not exist when I was in college, neither in Nepal nor in India, but still we managed to save a lot of wildlife, a lot of conservation, etc. But now this has been introduced only this year in 2018, and only last month or so I finished 2 topics, landscape conservation as well as global environment. So in the end, I am hoping that these activities of mine, as well all activities of mine, will all put together, we can work together in such a way that we have, yes, national development, and we have a cheap and mean conservation in which we don't spend a lot of money We always ask for the best return for our money, best return for our effort, and we don't stay behind, and we have our nature also saved really well. And when the problems get really difficult, there's always a way out. Take up a beer called Virendra from Switzerland, and cheers from Nepal. This is the end. Thank you very much.